Are you an investigative professional? Did you know you can find the best private investigator resources using investigatorstoolbox.com? This resource community was built exclusively for licensed investigators and investigative professionals. You can network directly with members, educate yourself through free webinars and blogs, and even create your own customizable research library. Membership starts for as little as 49 cents a day. Download the Investigators Toolbox app or visit our webpage at www.investigators-toolbox.com.
I want to talk to everybody today about ScopeNow.com. ScopeNow has been a big-time sponsor of this program for quite some time, and I just love their service. I've been using them since the beginning. I'm one of their beta customers, and it's been so awesome to see them grow into the business that they are today, and just how they just keep reinventing themselves and pushing themselves to get more and more information. What it comes down to is ScopeNow is a tool that you definitely need to use if you do social media investigations, any internet research, and really spending less time digging around and looking for information. I think is one of the best points of how ScopeNow can help you. Their AI platform, their analytics are amazing. You really get an idea of what you need. You're reducing the time, you're reducing the manpower that you're spending on doing this research, because they're essentially doing it for you, and they're doing it correctly, which is most important. One of the new things that they're actually offering is this flagging system where you can flag behaviors and really highlight and look out for fraud. If you're doing a lot of fraud research, this is a fantastic tool, and you can set up alerts. So you have particular people that you're looking at, you can actually set up alerts to get notifications when the criteria that you set up is actually is flagged and goes off. It's really, really amazing. And their relationship and association analytics are top notch, really cutting edge and really, really cool. When they brought that out on version 3, it was a game changer. I mean, really being able to see how people interact together and having that relationship, analysis is really, really something that's cool. One of the other things about being involved with ScopeNow is their ability to offer webinars. Their team is cutting edge on putting together and getting out really, really great content. If you're a member of ScopeNow, if you know who they are, you've seen them around on LinkedIn, you'll know that they're constantly doing webinars on these new websites that are coming out, and they're really staying on top of it. And don't forget, any reports that you generate, you can actually white label those reports and put your own logos on and really make them look professional, which could equate to more billing for you as well. So check them out today. It's www.scopenow.com. They're a great, great company. They should be one of the tools in your toolbox, along with whatever kind of search engines you do. You need to make sure that ScopeNow is a part of that suite. Scopenow.com.
Welcome to this week's episode of PI Perspectives. We have a great guest today. Author and podcaster Nancy Rommelmann joins us to discuss her experience with investigative journalism and how she covers her hot-button issues in our country. If you follow Nancy on Twitter, you know she's not afraid to state her opinion. So please welcome Nancy Rommelmann and your host, private investigator Matt Spaier.
And welcome everyone to this week's episode of PI Perspectives. This is Matt Spaier, your host. I want to welcome everyone to the program. I'm really excited today because this is a podcast episode that's like 2 years in the making. COVID be damned and whatnot. I want to welcome Nancy Rommelmann to the program. Nancy, how are you?
I'm fine. Yeah, I think it's like almost 2.5 years we started planning this and other big things, and then boink, kind of got pushed to the side. So here we are.
Yeah. So New Yorker / Oregonian, is that right?
New Yorker, born and bred in New York, 18 years in LA, and then bopped up to Portland, Oregon for 15 years, and now back in Chinatown in the city, and very, very happy to be. So yeah. So you're a journalist, and that's kind of your background. And we met at a Society of Professional Investigators event more than 2 years ago. Yeah.
And I was very drawn to your background and story, and I just found you to be incredibly interesting in your background. Just the journalistic look at things. And I wanted to have you come on today and just kind of talk about it, because we talked about like investigative journalism and private investigators and how there's some similarities there and some differences. And I think you have a cool perspective on things. And we're even going to talk about like some of the books you've written, which are pretty amazing too. So tell me a little bit about like your background and how you got into doing what you're doing now.
So I did not set out to be a journalist. I never went to journalism school or anything like that, though I guess I'd always been writing. My family and friends tell me I was always writing. I don't really remember doing that, but okay, I believe them. I went out to LA to be a movie star. Which did not happen, for which I'm eternally grateful. And when I was pregnant with my daughter, I was like, I really need to make a living, but I want to be home. I want to be home to raise her, right? So I started writing. I started like reading scripts for a big ICM, big agency, and then that segued into small bits of journalism. And by 1993, I started doing some actual journalism. My first long feature was a road trip going from Los Angeles with a pen pal of John Wayne Gacy's, the serial killer, to visit the killer on death row before he was executed. And it turned out to be a pretty big story. It was a good, let's jump into the deep end of the pool, Nancy. But it turned out really well. And it was on the cover of the LA Weekly, which at that time, it was very much like New York's Village Voice. Both papers are like ghost ships at this point, if they're even still around. But
I love Village Voice, man.
Oh, I know. I wrote for the Weekly for 20 years. I've been freelance my whole life, but I wrote hundreds of stories for the LA Weekly.
Read your stories without even knowing who you were in my 20s.
It happens. People say to me, I've had people say to me, "Oh man, did you see that story? I really loved it." I was like, "Yeah, I wrote that story." But anyway, it was 1994, and I had a career all of a sudden, and I was writing for all the papers in LA. It was a rich time for newspapers. There was a lot of money. There was a lot of opportunity. People from around the world want things from Los Angeles. It's not like if you're living, like when I moved to Portland in 2004, I mean, besides journalism sort of taking a big nosedive in general, people didn't really want stories from Portland. There wasn't that much going on. Until, of course, 2020, when I covered the protests and had a whole lot of work.
Seeing that on Twitter, you were all over that.
Oh man, I wrote 24 stories about what was going on. Anyway, we'll get into that. But in any case, I just never stopped writing. I've written many, many things. I've been a nightlife columnist. I've written for Bon Appetit, but the things I love the most, the stories that I call like the ones that are coming in the coffin with me, are the ones where the story is being reported a certain way. And I look at the way it's being reported, I'm like, that I don't think so. Or like I either have a different take and I want to find out why, or I have a almost violent reaction to the way it's being told. I'm like, no, that can't be right. And
not fair and balanced, damn it.
It's not just that. It's like, it's completely perquacky. I'll give you and your listeners an example. This was in Portland. Oh, I don't know. I think it was 2008. There was a very small item in the Oregonian, which is the daily paper there, about this mother in Vancouver, Washington, which is right over the border from Oregon. And it was like, it's so sad. This poor woman, Lori Recht, is just such a shame. She was unemployed and she had fibromyalgia, and ergo she had to kill her 14-year-old daughter and commit suicide herself. And I'm like, huh? Like what? So it just made zero sense. So I went up to my laptop, and within like 20 minutes, I had found out that this woman had accused her neighbors of hate crimes back in like the 90s when she was at SUNY Purchase. She accused them of spray painting anti-Semitic stuff in her dorm. Well, it turned out she was doing it to herself. Okay. And she actually got in big trouble because it was a federal school, right? Or a state school. In any case, I did this story and I realized she had Munchausen by proxy syndrome, which if people don't know what that is, that's when you either, you fabricate illness or distress in someone else in order to get sympathy and sunshine for yourself. Well, she'd done this to her child. She pretended her child had been sick her entire life, and it put her through terrible exigencies, just a horrible, horrible thing. Yeah. And I wrote the story. Now, that was basically because I saw something in the Oregonian that didn't smell right. And here's a little pat on the back for myself. The head of the opinion pages of the Oregonian, after my story ran in Willamette Week, which is the alt weekly up in Portland, he said, "Can I take you for a cup of coffee?" I thought he was going to yell at me, but he said, "No, you got it right. We got it wrong. Do you want to write for me?" So, sometimes you just have to follow your nose. It's sometimes extremely not popular. You're writing something where people, they already think they know what the story is, and it's a story that makes them feel comfortable. Right. We know the bad guy, we know the good guy, and I want to put it to bed, Nancy, and you're making it harder for me to do that. Well, I'm sorry. My job is to report the story as I find it, and hopefully I'm not getting it wrong. If I do get it wrong, I will say that I got it wrong. But it means all I want to do is yeah.
Sorry, I got a question for you. So yeah. How do you think that like social media, the Twitters, the ability to have access to basically your readers, how has that changed your writing style, or are you like cognizant of that you may have to defend your view on something at some point? Like, how are you approaching all that?
It's funny, unhappy people complain and happy people tend to not do anything. But I will say, I even though Twitter can be a hellhole, I absolutely love it because I have made 50 billion connections there. People give me leads to stories. They encourage me. Now, will you get Twitter hate? Yes. Oh my goodness. Of course you will. And you will get people, especially when I was reporting from Portland, I was not reporting the popular story. I was reporting what I saw, but that was not the popular story. The popular story was cops bad, protesters good, full stop. And I was like, well, I'm out here every night and I'm going to tell you that, absolutely. Did the Portland police and the federal officers that Trump sent in, did they cover themselves in glory? No, but I'm also tell you something else. I'm out here and I watched the protesters for 3 hours provoke them with, different IEDs and shining lights and trying to blind the police. I mean, throwing flaming barbecues over the fence at the federal building. It's like, do you consider that kind of provocation? What are officers supposed to do? Yeah. Just like stand there like a mushroom? So they didn't like hearing that because they felt they're like, well, you're a Trump tard or you're anti-protest. I'm like, I'm trying to give you the story I'm seeing. I mean, let me give you a funny, hilarious example. So I was there one night in front of the federal building. And we could put a link up. I wrote 24 stories about this stuff and I have video. Right. And there's a guy, they've like broken through the fencing and now they're bashing in the building again, which they did over. This poor building had been desecrated so many times and molested. And there's a young guy with a fire extinguisher, like a heavy one, and he's smashing through the wood. And everyone's like, yeah,
with fire extinguisher. I don't understand.
Right. They're screaming and they're jumping around. Yeah. And I took a video and I posted this, put it on Twitter. And somebody came in and said, I can tell that Nancy Rommelmann filmed this in a studio. And I can tell from the shine on this guy's helmet. I'm like, okay, I don't know what to tell you. Like,
yeah, I figured they probably would say from the moon lander that was behind you.
Exactly. But like I would have why would I do this? Also, I've been how long have I started writing in 1994? What year is this now? Is it 26 years, 36 years? Yeah, I can't do math. Yeah, I can't. I have actually, I really, really can't. I have problems with numbers. But it's like, why would I do you think I'd have a career if that's what I did? I'm not.
Years. I think it's 28.
Thank you. It is 28 years. So anyway, I love doing these stories. I'm about to leave for another story tomorrow morning. I'm flying to San Francisco to cover the Chesa Boudin recall. He's the progressive DA in San Francisco that people are whether the data matches up or not, they're under the impression that the city's in big trouble, and they feel that they can lay some of this at his feet. And California has the recall. They've had it since something like 1911, and they use it. Probably, I don't know if they use it too much or too little. I think recalls are interesting. So I'll be going out there and speaking with lots and lots of people and trying to get a balanced story there.
So that's what I love about your writing style and just your personality, who you are, right? You're this extremely creative person. And
thank you.
But you have a nose for the news as well, right? So it's like you have that balance of creativity and just having that spirit of an artist, but also not afraid to like, no, this is not right. This is how it needs to be. I'm going to go and do this. It's something that has always caught my eye in your style. I think it's
that's very nice. It's funny. I went to Ukraine not too long ago. I went in March, and I've done some stories that, get a little, I don't know if danger is the right word, but you're walking into things, you're having to talk to people, and people say sometimes like, oh, you're brave. I actually don't like it when people say that at all, because would be harder for me not to speak up and not to investigate. Now, look, I went to Ukraine. I did not go to Kiev, and I'm not that kind of reporter. I'm not like a war reporter at all. But the thing is, when you speak your mind, even if it's not, if it doesn't match or it's not popular, and then you realize there are a lot of people that also have been waiting to hear this, or they've wanted to say it themselves, but they don't want to because they're afraid people aren't going to like them, or they're going to get piled on, and they think you're brave. And I'm like, frankly, it would be harder for me not to speak up. Like, I can't do it. And again, am I wrong sometimes? Of course I'm wrong sometimes. But then you meet interesting people that help you do better. Sure. It's great. It just never ends, Matt. That's what's so fantastic about this job. It's like, if you're interested and you've got the energy to do it, it never stops. One story leads into the next story. And I think it's, people that love their jobs, they always say I have the best job in the world. Well,
so how do you identify which story you're going to focus on? And like, how did you say, okay, I'm going to go to San Francisco tomorrow and do all this?
So I was actually in Portland, I think it was February, and I was up there covering some more stuff that was going on. I actually went with the writer Thomas Chatterton Williams, who some of your listeners may know. He's great. He's American, but he lives in Paris. He's a really super smart guy, writes for The Atlantic. He wanted to do some writing about Portland, and he knew that I'd done a lot of writing. He's like, do you want to meet there? I'm like, sure. So we went up and met, and we did a whole bunch of things, and I did some reporting, and then I just kind of was doing a little West Coast cruise. And then a friend of mine was going to be in San Francisco, and I was like, well, why don't we meet, because I'm interested in this school board recall, because it seemed so interesting. The kids had been out of school, and the school board was like super, super progressive and accusing parents, including Chinese parents, of like racism if you wanted your kids to be back in school. And then like, what we're going to do is spend our time like renaming schools that we think are racist. It was just such a shite show, right? And I thought, let me report on that. So I did, and then I went to the watch party to see if the school board members would be recalled, and they were. And I met some interesting people, including a woman who was very involved in the Chesa Boudin recall, which was coming up. It's coming up this coming Tuesday. And I stayed in touch with her, and I just thought I actually didn't know whether I was going to go back to Ukraine this month, or if I was going to go to San Francisco. So a couple of weeks ago, I just sort of committed to San Francisco, and I'm going. And, it's funny when you're walking into these stories, you don't know who you want to talk to. You've got some idea, and it is bananas. This story is so hot, or as my podcast partner says, it's such a spicy meatball that you open your mouth. I went on Twitter and was like, wait, hey, who should I talk to? I was getting so many DMs yesterday from people that like every 10 minutes, I had 3 more people saying, talk to this person. I'll hook you up with this person. Let's do this thing. And I was like, great. That's
when you know you got something, right?
Oh man, it's like you threw your line in and 42 fish jumped out at you. And what I'm really excited to do is to talk to everybody. is to not just go to the pro and not just go to the anti. And everybody's interesting. Everybody's balanced. They're not insane. I already had a really great interview with a police officer who's in the mission, who's like looking at all the, the fentanyl overdoses. And like, he's like, you see brains on the sidewalk again, you start to get an idea that maybe we do need new leadership. So it's just a fascinating story. So hopefully I can do a good job and bring some dispatches to you guys.
So are you getting a sense of that there's starting to be this change of public opinion as far as like these hot button issues? I mean,
100%.
Yeah,
100%. But
we can talk Texas. I mean, that's a whole other show.
Oh, so do you mean in general? Do you mean like overall? Yes, but yes, I do. I think that, it is not summer 2020. Right. George Floyd, rest his soul, has been dead for more than 2 years now. We've adjudicated that case. Trump is no longer in office. Trump, the great, provocateur. COVID is over. We've learned from some of our mistakes. I don't think we're in the ideological fever we were in 2020. Yeah. And people have to look at it now and say, okay, maybe I felt like it was right to do this now. Maybe I'm tired of this. Maybe I'm tired of being called a racist when I know I'm not a racist. Yeah. What are the issues I care about now for my family? And I think when, just as an example, when Chesa Boudin came into office, which was late in 2019, that fever was burning, baby. And now, whether, again, like one of my editors at Reason Magazine, she's like, I'm really interested to know, are things worse in San Francisco? And B, how much of it can be laid at the DA, Chesa Boudin's feet? And the answer is, I can give you that data. It maybe not how much can be laid at his feet, but the thing is, like, it's perception versus reality, and perception counts for a lot.
Sure. So for folks that don't know Chesa Boudin in that situation, can you kind of break it down a little bit in layman's terms?
So Chesa Boudin used to be a public defender, so meaning he worked for, he was defending clients, but his history is very, very interesting. So he is the son of two Weather Underground members. Weather Underground was the radical sort of American terrorist organization that grew out of the Students for Democratic Society in the 1970s. His parents, I believe it was in 1980, they were involved in, they were driving the getaway car for a Brinks truck stick-up with a Black liberation group, and 2 officers and a guard were killed. They were not involved in the actual shooting, but they each went to jail for murder when Chesa Boudin was 14 months old. Oh, wow. He was adopted by the heads of the Weather Underground, who was Bernardine Dorn and Bill Ayers, who were gigantic radicals. And they were raised. So at one point, all 4 of his parents were on wanted FBI posters. Wow. So he grew up, I think he comes by his opinions of how he thinks the law should work quite honestly. He believes in restorative justice. He believes in no cash bail. He's very progressive. And, there are a lot of DAs right now in this country that are. You can look in Portland, you look in Philadelphia, and we can look at the data, and some things are worse and some things aren't. Right. But does that, and one of the main complaints that people have against him is, like, we already have public defenders. You can't be the DA and also be more invested in what happens to the arrested than to the victims. Yeah. It's an interesting conversation. I spoke with Lara Bazelon, who's very smart. She's at San Francisco State, and she's an attorney. And she's like, Nancy, the DA has to look at the city holistically. He has to actually represent everyone, because we're all under his system of justice. So I got to tell you, people are hysterical about this. I mean, I talked to Laura Bazelon yesterday, and she's like, people are just like yelling at me, like, you B word, you C word, as she's up there just trying to explain his positions. Yeah. There's lunch there if you want it. There's lunch on the table if you want it. Anyway, sorry, that was Matt Welch, who some of your listeners may know. He's recording. We have a recording studio here at Paloma Media. Yeah, he's recording with Maud Marin, who in the studio, and I'm here in the other part of my apartment. So anyway,
Studio B. You're in
Studio B. I'm on Studio B.
It's all good. It's all good. Well, this is a good point actually to take a break.
Okay.
And when we come back, I want to talk a little bit about your podcast, and we'll dive into that and some of the new projects and things that you're involved in. So, everybody sit tight, and we will be right back.
Check out the PI Institute of Education at piinstitute.com. Since 1989, Kelly Riddle has been teaching on subjects such as surveillance, nursing home investigations, insurance fraud, domestic investigations, hidden assets, and accident scene investigations. The PI Institute of Education is a featured learning partner in the investigatorstoolbox.com. So check out the free content on the site, then visit the Institute for more great savings on additional classes.
You guys have been hearing for a long time about how much I love Crosstracks, but now you're going to hear from somebody else. So we got George Gerges here. George is a member and a user of Crosstracks. George, tell me real quickly what you love about Crosstracks.
The simplicity of using it and the ability to customize everything that you could do with Crosstracks is awesome. It actually allowed me to take the way that I do my business and implement it into their system. And not only am I able to manage 10 or 15 cases, I'm able to manage 50 to 100 cases with the same effort.
Fantastic. So Crosstracks, the case management system, they are SOC 2 certified. Basically, that's an encryption, really an upgrade. They're the only ones out there that are doing it. So please support this great sponsor that supports our show. Check them out. The links are in the show notes. Crosstracks, if you're an investigator, you should be using them today.
Looking for an insurance agent that puts you first? Every PI business is different. That's why OREP Insurance can shop multiple markets to ensure you get the best coverage to meet your unique business needs. OREP's model is business by the golden rule, and for over 20 years, they've built their business by putting their clients first. So come enjoy a fast online application and same-day certificates of insurance at OREP.org. OREP has coverage for armed investigators, executive protection, and even has a separate policy for security firms. The application takes less than 5 minutes, so visit OREP.org today. OREP.org. Have you heard that the National Association of Legal Investigators will be having its next live conference this month? It's not too late to register. Join the best legal investigators as they meet in Louisville, Kentucky from June 22nd until June 24th. Visit Churchill Downs or sample some bourbon. You don't want to miss this great event. Learn more at Nally.com. Check out the latest issue of PI Magazine available online or via hard copy. Just visit PIMagazine.com.
And welcome back to PI Perspectives. This is Matt Sperry, your host. Today we are joined by Nancy Rommelman. Nancy is an investigative journalist, creative, just an all-around awesome person who likes to report the truth.
I want you to follow me around, please.
There we go. So she's actually got some books, To the Bridge, The True Story of Motherhood and Murder, which she spoke about a little bit earlier, and Destination Gacy, A Cross-Country Journey to Shake the Devil's Hand, which we also covered a little bit earlier. And we'll have links in the show notes to all that stuff. And please follow her on Twitter. What is your Twitter handle?
At Nancy Rom, NancyRomm.
It's a good follow, folks. There's definitely a lot of spiciness. Let's call that.
It's a spicy meatball, as my podcast partner says. Yeah.
Right. So podcast, we teased that before we took a break here. So tell me a little bit about this podcast and what you guys are doing.
Yeah. So a couple of months ago, I met online a journalist named Sarah Hepola. Like it sounds, Hepola. And she is a journalist out of Dallas. She wrote a really, really interesting essay for The Atlantic called The Things I'm Afraid to Write About. I think that's the name of it. And she also had a book called Blackout, Remembering the Things I Drank to Forget. She's been sober 14 years, but boy, did she have some stories. Really, really good journalist. Wrote for Texas Monthly. She comes from a alt weekly background as I do. Anyway, we just started talking online and I kind of just fell in love with her. And so she came to New York. We had a little party for her here. And she and I started recording. And I said, but as opposed to just putting it up, we have a little media site called palomamedia.com. We've got a YouTube, and I was just throwing them up there. And I was like, we have to start a podcast. So we started, it's called Smoke 'em If You Got 'em. We launched it, I think, April 22nd. And man, it just ripped out of the gate. The
Cool.
tagline is two journo babes on what's burning through the culture now. And we're covering different things. She actually went to the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial. She spent 5 days there. We're talking about, like, we talked about Ray Liotta. We talked about, anything that's happening in the culture right now. We are just we're just like hungry journalists. But if I may say so, I think we're also pretty funny and people are liking it. So I would love it. It's on Substack. It's easy to find. You can be a free subscriber. You can be a paid subscriber, and we're really enjoying it. We're putting out content twice a week, and it's funny. I use this line a lot. It's like, no one has to tell you to kiss your boyfriend. You want to kiss your boyfriend. And I just want to record with her. We recorded yesterday morning, and we do it sort of like we're seeing each other, but we just have audio. And I was just like so happy to see her and start talking. So I hope people like it. Give it a shot. Yeah.
I got to tell you that whole seeing each other, like I have a video aspect to the show, but most people listen to it online or the audio version of it through podcasting, whatever. And when you're looking at somebody, the energy is completely different.
Oh, you have to. I mean, I do, whenever I record with someone, I'm seeing them. I use Zencastr. It's super easy. Yeah, I mean, and it doesn't matter. That's right. Most people do, like, so we have the Paloma Media has a YouTube channel, and Matt Welch and I actually will, we do things live, and, audience, listeners, viewers can type their questions and all that stuff. But most people are like, oh, we just listen to it.
That's dangerous.
Which is fine.
That's dangerous.
What's dangerous?
Live. I don't do live shows.
It's fun. We're just total goofballs. We just like it. And people, we just do it for fun. So
I don't like rejection.
Yeah. Well, who does? I don't know.
And it's an interesting format and interesting, different way of doing things. Right. And that's what's so great about content that's out there is that there's literally something for everyone, whatever your taste is, like you like to mix it up. I know Kelly Paxton is one who talks about the different shows that she listens to, and she's got her list of things, and she always says like, oh, well, you would be surprised what my list is, like knowing who I am. Yep. It's not all about investigators. Like I listen to business type podcasts, I listen to this and that, and it really is personal preference, and the content that's available is just amazing what's out there, right?
It's endless. I mean, it could be cooking, it can be gardening, it can be murder, it can be, numerology, whatever you want, it's going to be out there. Yeah. Megan Down, who's a very good writer and a good podcaster, she has a show called The Unspeakable, a podcast. But she wrote an essay like way before COVID even about things her marriage had broken up, but she'd moved cross country, and she talked about the community she actually started to feel she had by listening to different podcasters. Like she actually didn't know them, but she felt like she did. Right. I think she mentioned John McWhorter and Glenn Lowry, and Sarah Hepola, again, my partner, she had that same experience during COVID listening to the Fifth Column podcast. Like she felt like these guys and some other ones she mentioned in her article were like, they actually were her friends. Yeah. And then of course you break the wall and they do become your friends.
I totally
which is interesting.
I go to conferences and like all the time I have people coming up and say, hey, I can just enjoy listening to the show. And I've been doing it since 202019. So I think I got about 175.
Ooh, OG.
Shows. People are, if they're not tired of me yet, it's coming.
After this show, like, okay, that's it. I didn't like that one.
Yeah, we're just going to end on Ramalman. She closed Forlini's. Like we talked about that offline, right? So for your New Yorkers out there, Forlini's was the restaurant where the Society of Professional Investigators used to go to. That's actually where I met Nancy. And she was there the last day or the day before they closed for good.
Totally randomly. I was at a speakeasy on Cortlandt Avenue. We met this guy. We were sitting at the bar, and we're like, Howard, blah, blah, blah. He's like, oh, it's my birthday. I just decided to take myself out for my birthday. And he's like gone and done different things. And he'd met all kinds of interesting people. And that was like 9:30. He's like, and now I'm kind of hungry. I'm like, well, let's go get a bite. And we went to Forlini's. Yeah. And the next day it closed. Like, what? I was like, what are you gonna do? So anyway, real New Yorker here.
So just a little side story on the two, like when we met, right? So your background, I was like, wow, this is cool. We're both big basketball fans, so we kind of
yes, we are.
Right? I'm Knicks.
Yeah. And you gave me some Knicks. You gave me Knicks tickets. I took my daughter.
Admitting to anything, but my daughter had a nice experience at courtside. That's what I'm gonna say. So anyway, so like we hit it off, we met. I was like, wow, this is great. And then I'm like, I don't really consider myself a writer. Like my English skills, like when I got into college, they made me take English 100. Okay. So, not knowing that I'm going to be writing for a living, reports and things like that. And I have had the honor and the opportunity to write for different publications and contribute to books, which is amazing to me because again, English 100 guy, now he's actually writing for a living, which is nuts, right? So I had the opportunity to write for Psychology Today, which is kind of random, like why would an investigator do it? But it was something they were highlighting Society of Professional Investigator members, and you could contribute. I remember I contributed something, and the guy who was running the organization at the time, Bruce Sackman, like he came back to me, he goes, not the best stuff here. Like you got to punch it up a little bit, right? So it was it was hurtful to my pride, but he wasn't wrong. Like he needed a little bit of help. So what did I do? Well, Nancy owes me a favor because Knicks tickets, right? And I'm like, hey, can you punch this up for me? And I had like literally a professional punch this up, and then I resubmitted back to Bruce, and he's like, well, I don't know. I'm still like having issues. I was like, listen, Rommelman says it's okay, so it's got to go. And he goes, okay, we'll put it in.
But well, first of all, we'll work for Knicks tickets. I'm just putting it out there.
Yeah, there we go. Well, Blazers too, right?
Right, exactly. But wow, I could have done a better job. I apologize.
Yeah. No, it was cool. Bruce was just busting my chops, I think.
Okay.
And it was published. I've actually been published twice in Psychology Today, and
cool.
I write for PI Magazine like literally every issue for the past 3 years. I've got something in there, and I contributed to Chelsea Binns and Bruce's book, The Art of Investigation. I was honored to actually write a chapter for that. So it's like, here's a kid who was like in English 100, but actually has done some writing. So,
that's the thing about writing is like, you really have to teach yourself to do it. I'm sure you can take classes and that's fine. Yeah. Because you'll be exposed to writing, but the way you learn to write is to read and write. That's it. That's how you learn to do it. Just like, it's like you can read a book about basketball, but how are you going to learn to play basketball? You got to go play.
Crossover stuff. Yeah. You can't read about how to do crossover.
No.
It's interesting too, because as investigators, like we have the stories, right? So it's like you overcome that content. Like we have tons of content to write about.
Yep.
But it's like, how do you get that content down? So Scott Fulmer's another guy, right? He likes to write. I'm like, how do you do that? John Hoda, another guy. Like, how do you dedicate this crazy, insane amount of time to write these big, huge books? Kelly Riddle's another guy. Kelly Riddle's written like 15 books. How do you do it?
Yeah, I wish I could be that prolific. I had a girl once, and she said to me, I've got this. She said something to me like, don't you hate editors? I'm like, I love editors. I'm like, why would you hate an editor? She's like, well, they wouldn't make your work better. I'm like, well, actually they do. She wasn't a writer, by the way. Yeah. And she said to me, I've got this whole book in my head, this whole book. I've got it all. All I need to do is write it. I'm like, yeah, that's the trick. It's like, it doesn't matter how good your ideas are or how amazing the stories you have. Right. You got to get it in a form where you're going to engage the reader. There's a very successful magazine writer, and he's written tons of books, William Langus Fisha. People should look him up. He's amazing. And I interviewed him once a number of years ago, and he said, if the reader stops writing, that's your fault. If stops reading, that's your fault. It's always your fault. I think the worst thing anybody can say to me as a writer, and I haven't had it happen in a while, but it happened a couple of times years ago. I would write something and I don't know if I'd ask them to read it, to proof it, or if it'd already been published. I wanted their opinion. When they say, let me read it again, that's not a good thing. Yeah. That means it didn't hit, it didn't land.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, no, it is a process and you get better. Same thing with podcasting, right? When I first started podcasting, I go back, I listen to my early episodes. I'm like, who is this joker? This hack? Yeah. This sounds terrible, and purposely, like, one of the hardest things to do, I've said this before, is do solo episodes, like talk to yourself for 20.
Oh yeah. 30 oh no.
Minutes, But now it's like, I could do that easy. It's like, I'm just comfortable in the environment and the setup in doing it. And, I consider myself to be kind of a creative also. I like to write music. I've written for articles, and, I'm always trying to do different things and kind of push things to keep things fresh, right? That's how I get good guests and all that, I have had amazing guests on the show, and it's people like, how do you find these people? I'm like, I just know them,
and one leads to another, right? Yeah. That's what I was saying. It's like one story leads to another, one guest leads to another. I'll say something, you'll come back to me later and go, remember that person you said, she sounds really interesting. It's like, great, I'll hook you up. So.
And then I get bummed when somebody who I want to interview goes on someone else's podcast. I'm just like, well, crap, I'm going to have to wait 6 months now. That's happened a few times, but no, it's cool. I mean, and it's so easy now, the different mediums that are out there to get your voice out, and it's almost approachable to have the whole editor thing. Like I get solicited often by publishing companies, houses, whatever. They're like, oh, we want to help you write a book or whatever. And I'm just like, yeah, okay, you want me to pay, 15 grand to write something.
Oh, how weird. Yeah. When you could just do it yourself for free. That's one thing we know, that journalism in many ways has been demonetized. We've moved things. How do we make money now? Well, I make money on Substack. I've got a couple different Substacks. One is Make More Pie, or just under my name, Nancy Rommelmann. The other is Smoke 'em If You Got 'em. The cards have been thrown in the air and shuffled. But if you create good content, people want it and they will pay you for it. But they're never going to get tired of listening to stories. Ever. I read a quote once, and I wish I could remember where, because I've said it now like 12 times. I once read that people will voluntarily go longer without food than they will without hearing or telling stories.
Ask Gandhi. I'm sure he was a chatty Cathy. There's probably truth to that. We are, creatures that need stimulation, right? So, and
communication, which is part of the reason why COVID was so debilitating, because and maybe one of the reasons why, a Substack became so popular, because we were desperate to have communication, even if you were just listening, even if you were just listening to people and you didn't like have a voice in it. So there was, one upside to COVID is we've created an appetite for and a market for telling stories.
Yeah, and then there is a saturation there that happened too, though. And
sure,
a saturation and a fall off, right? So, there was a time where people I could do this, and then they see it's actual work, because you do put in a podcast on. It's hard work. Booking guests, and interviewing them and then writing a copy for it. And I have sponsors, I'm contacting my sponsors. I have meetings with my sponsors all the time, what's going on with this, and people don't realize the back end of things. I have a producer who's amazing. Just absolutely amazing.
Well, we just we're seat of the pants over here, but we get the content out there. But it's like anything. It's like, when frozen yogurt or jazzercise or whatever became popular, then all of a sudden you've got 5,000 other people doing it because they think they want to do it, but they don't really want to do it, right? They don't really want to put the time into it or make it interesting, or it wasn't their idea in the first place. And so it falls off, and you have the people that are still good at it doing it, or the people that were good at it saying, oh, I want to do the next interesting thing. I want to do this story. I go to San Francisco tomorrow. I've got a book idea I want to work on. Okay, so I'll do that now. You know, you've got the drive. So
yeah, and like understanding how they can both like work together is something that's great too. So I had a friend in marketing. You know, he's in media. Actually, he owns like a couple big media companies, and he taught me, you know, the value of using different mediums. Right. So it's like you now have this podcast, and you're going to be talking about the content that you write. Like if people enjoy your podcast, they're going to.
And we're also going to write. We're also like I have my Substacks. My one Substack is pretty much all written. Sometimes I'll throw in links to a podcast, but on the other one, which is Smoke 'em If You Got 'em, we're putting out 2, you know, spoken episodes a week, but we're also posting content. We're also posting written content, you know, articles that we're writing or essays or just like little one-offs. Because once people want to be in the room with you, like you can do a thing. Like I could do a video of baking cookies, and I'm talking to people. What's not to like? Yeah. You know, you're spending time with them, and it's
It's almost like the format of the David Letterman interviews now, the new ones. You know, he sits down. Yeah. So you know, for my next guest, right? That's the name of the show. Okay. So and he'll interview stars or whatever. But he never just sits there and interviews. They do a portion of the show that is that sit down interview, but there's another portion of the show where he's doing something. Like he'll go to their home and cookies, or they'll go and walk the neighborhood, or do like he went like shopping with who was it with Kim Kardashian? Like
why not?
Like in a grocery store or you know, and they're just chatting. And I'm like, Letterman's a genius.
Well, you can do that.
Love it.
There's no bar now. Okay. Like you can go buy yourself a $200 camera and do that, right? Yeah. It's not like you have to walk around with this guy with a $30,000 camera anymore. You could do it yourself. You could stick a GoPro on your head and do it. The entry bar of entry, is that an expression, is so low. I mean, we built a studio here. I built a studio in the other part of my apartment here in my nightgown. Okay. Like
Studio A,
like,
we're in Studio
B. We're in Studio B.
Yeah,
Studio A. Like I'm putting up the baffling on the wall and like getting the camera set. It was like, we just did it. Yeah. Like we just did it. We didn't wait for anybody to tell us, is it perfect? No, but guess what? It pumps out content, and then we'll just make it better. Yeah. You know?
And the other key too is just it's sounding good.
Yeah.
Right? Content has to be good, but microphone has to be good too. And you know, that, you know, there is something to be said about production value, and I'm a big believer in it. And honestly, like I have sponsors and they help pay for all that stuff. So if I didn't have the sponsorship,
send them my way. No, I'm teasing. We're good. Yeah. We're good.
You know, if I didn't have these businesses that believe in the content that I'm putting out there and supporting it, you know, it wouldn't sound as good. It wouldn't look as good. And it'd be a lot harder to justify doing a show once a week. Now I've been on the fall 2019 every week, sometimes twice a week. Yeah. So it's like consistently, we have not missed 1 week. And it's like, I hold myself to it. I had freaking COVID and I'm still putting content out, you know, which is nuts, but I love doing it. I love meeting people and chatting with people and getting their stories out. And you know, listen, you're not a private investigator. You know, why would you be on PI Perspectives? Well, there's a lot of what you do that ties in with that. And I think you're a super interesting person. I love what you do. And again, just the way you figured out to tell a story, I think is just amazing, right? That passion with the facts behind it being in your face, I think is something that's really, really cool.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you for having me. Sure. And I hope to keep the stories coming. So I'd be happy for any of your listeners to check in on, I'm really easy to find. You can go on Twitter, you can DM me. I mean, if someone says they can't find me, they're not looking. And we'll communicate and hopefully keep putting out some new good content.
Awesome. So we're going to wind down here. Nancy, thank you so much for coming on. 2 years in the making.
It's worth it.
It was totally worth it.
Okay, Matt. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. So thanks everyone for tuning in. We'll catch everybody next week consistently on the next show. And please go check out Nancy's show. It's I'm going to actually go check it out because I'm excited. And who doesn't want to hear about current events and just a fresh perspective to stay on top of things. So we will catch everybody next week on the next show. Take care.
Okay. Bye.
Well, this was fun. Nancy's a great guest, and it's awesome getting to know her a little better. Make sure you follow her on Twitter @Nancy Rom. ROMM. Links to her podcast and books will be in the show notes. We'd also like to thank Crosstracks, Scope Now, PI Institute of Education, and OREP for sponsoring this show. So please, support our great supporters. And have you thought about joining Investigators Toolbox yet? Now's the time to get on board and join the fastest growing digital community for investigative professionals. Just use code PIP201836 to save 10% on membership. If you have a question about the show, just email Matt at matthews@satellitepi.com. You can also find him on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. We'd like your feedback to bring you the best shows possible, like this one. And we'll be back next week with a new show, so make sure you tune in and stay safe out there.